I have a strong bias towards the work of what's now called the Thinking Collaborative, which kind of houses both of those pieces of work. So that's going to be the basis of our training together today. As Connie said, cognitive coaching is an 8-day training. It's a lot of skills and then practice of those skills. The book that we're going to reference today, Mentoring Matters, is the book that I use with my mentors in Clayton. We do this over a 6-day, 2 to 3 hour sessions throughout the year. So that's 6 meetings, if you will. And I'm going to try to kind of put that all down to 2 hours with you today. So please be aware it's the really quick and dirty version of this work. Okay. So I want to find a little bit about who you are in the room, and for you guys also maybe to know a little bit more about each other as well. And this is kind of weird where the screen is over there and I'm over here. But we're going to do an inclusion activity called That's Me, which you may have experienced before. There we go. So I'm going to put some statements up on the screen, and I'll say them as well. And then if that applies to you, if you'll just raise your hand. And the goal is for me to get to know who's in the room, and for you then to look around and see who's in the room as well. Okay? So the first one is, I forgot when I put my first one up, is I work in an elementary school. So how many of you work primarily in an elementary school? Okay. I work in a middle school. I'm too afraid, far away here. Okay. How about I work in the high school? Okay. How about an early childhood center? Okay. How about I work mostly with adults in my day? All right. My clicker doesn't like this today. How about you? You personally have been teaching less than 10 years. All right. How about I've been teaching 11 to 20 years? So those are pretty close. How about more than 20 years? Oh, that's really like third. Interesting. I'm in that group too. All right, I got a couple more for you. We're going to switch over to, well, I may just have to use this because it doesn't like it today. How about I've mentored someone before? This is not your first time mentoring. How about I've been assigned to work with someone who has 3 years or less experience? And that's a lot of you. Okay, how about the person I've assigned to work with has got 3 to 15 years of experience? And then how about over 15 years? Anybody have a mentee that's over? Okay. So that's a pretty significant difference from the clientele that we service in Clayton. We don't hire that many brand new teachers. We tend toward the middle and the end. But I think that is interesting information in terms of what you might be considering and thinking about with those teachers. Okay. 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 So they're just not here tonight. Great. How about my mentee has a similar job assignment to my own? All right. And then how many of you are still in contact or connect with your own mentor, the person who mentored you? Look around the room on that one. That's kind of interesting. Okay. So you really have an opportunity to make a pretty big impact on somebody's life. I know my mentor at the end of my first year said to me, I think you could have probably mentored me. I was like, yay, that was really helpful. Thanks for that. All right, here's our agenda for today. Like I said, this is kind of what I've boiled it down to. We're going to talk about this term, learning-focused interactions, which again comes from this book, Mentoring Matters. That's what they call a mentoring relationship. What is it, why is it important, and how do we do that? And really the rest of the agenda is about the how. We're talking about what do you do to maximize listening when you're working with another person. What are some of the protocols that you can use in having conversations? So what are some kind of scaffolds that will help you have really beneficial, effective conversations with your mentee? And then finally, what does feedback look like, and what can you do to make it more effective? All right, so we're going to start off with this idea of learning-focused relationships or interactions. So you have a handout. Hopefully, if you didn't, there's more over there. If you'll turn to that first page, there's a little box there that says, what is a learning-focused relationship? And what does it have to do with mentoring? Take just a minute and jot down what's your initial thinking about that term. And then just turn to someone nearby and share what you wrote or what you're thinking. All right, go ahead and finish your sentence that you're on. So again, the reason I'm choosing to share this particular piece with you, the authors of Mentoring Matters are Bruce Wellman and Laura Lipton. Bruce Wellman is also one of the co-authors of Adaptive Schools with Robert Garmston, and Robert Garmston is one of the co-authors of Cognitive Coaching with Art Costa. So all of this work kind of overlaps each other and the language is really similar. So have any of you had cognitive coaching training or adaptive schools? Okay, so some of this may sound kind of familiar. They're all really connected. So they use this term, you may remember yourself when you were first starting out teaching that there were a lot of times it was this buddy mentor concept that you just had this person next door and they just came in every now and then, which is definitely what mine was. Hey, how's it going? You want to go get some drinks? Okay, good luck. And that was pretty much the extent of our conversation. Occasionally we had longer, we made lunch together or something, but we didn't really talk a whole lot about instruction. It was just someone to kind of be there to listen if I had a problem, but it was mostly focused on emotional support. So this is really taking it to another level. So they define this quite a bit differently from that. Oh, clicker, I think my batteries are going low. Okay, so Lipton and Wellman use the term learning focus to mean this. They say it's about offering support. So it definitely has support, but we define support by emotional, physical, so it could be like you come in and help them set something up or their room, instructional, and institutional. And that institutional is a lot about like, how do we do things in Francis Howell? What are the hidden rules in our building? Those kinds of things, okay? So it's much broader. When we use the word support, it's not just about someone who, you can vent with, which is, certainly there's a place for that, but you're going much far beyond that, okay? The next piece is this idea of creating challenge. And this might be a little bit outside of your realm of thinking about a mentoring relationship, but they really purport that a goal for us is to help them get better, to grow, to improve, both for ourselves, but also for them and their students and the school district at large, and education at large, really. But that idea of what can you do to push them a little bit where it's not necessarily comfortable, but safe. Have you ever seen that idea of a risk zone? If you hang out in that comfort zone all the time where it feels really good, it feels nice, but you don't really grow. And you don't want to be in the risk zone where you're like feeling stressed and crazy all the time. But in between there's the zone of proximal development, right? That place where you can actually grow a little bit, but you have to be challenged in order to get there. Are you checking on that for me? Thank you. That's okay. I think that'll work great. Thank you. I think my batteries are almost gone. I think that's the problem. All right. So that's that idea of creating challenge. Thank you. That's much better. And then the last one is facilitating professional vision. And again, this connects to the district. So what's the vision of our teachers here in Francis Howell? But also, oh, it's behind me too. Oh, that's why you're looking over there. Sorry, new room. But also that idea of developing a professional identity. Who do you want to be as an educator? How do you develop teachers that are lifelong learners? What are the things that we have to put into place to really help that? So it's both really small, offering support, to a little bit bigger, that idea of kind of getting better and improvement, and then the really big, long-term kind of thinking. That all three things are really important in a learning-focused relationship. How does it benefit a new teacher? Well, several things. It increases efficacy, which means I have that feeling of I can make a difference I feel efficacious. I can go out and do something. I know what I'm going to do the next day. The kind of conversations that you're having produce results in the classroom as well as in their thinking. It engages teachers in collaboration. So it's really setting the tone for this is how education works. We are not go in the classroom, close the door people anymore. That really, in order to do the work that we have to do in schools, which is darn hard work, we need all the brains in the room together. And so this is kind of setting the stage for this is what teachers do. They work together. And then finally, retention of teachers. So this whole idea of training mentors, training teachers, to be, as part of the induction process, is time-consuming and expensive, as well as it loses consistency in a district, in a building. So the more we can keep the teachers that we train and make a part of our system, the better it is for all of us. Does that kind of connect with what you were talking about with your neighbor? Okay. All right. Consider a couple of other things. When you are in a conversation, and your intent is really about supporting growth and learning, what are some of the things that you pay attention to in order to determine if it's working or not? And along with that, what are things that you actually kind of cue in on in others in order to know I might need to shift the kind of interaction that I'm having? So you can think about yourself as a learner, but you can also think about when you're with a student or with your students. How do you know that a lesson isn't going well and you need to do something different? What do you pay attention to, and what do you do in order to, with the intention to support growth and learning in your students? Again, check in with somebody nearby, maybe a different person this time. Where does your mind go when I pose those two questions? And finish your sentence, please. So let's start out talking about your classrooms. How do you know it's working? What are you paying attention to in your class that tells you, yes, this is a good day. They're getting where I want them to go. What do you pay attention to? Just call something out. Body language. What else? Yes, it's working. What are you seeing? What are you paying attention to in order to know they're learning? Okay, engagement. And how do you know their engagement? What do you see? Okay. Okay, so there's, again, some nonverbals again. Okay, what else? Okay. How about that idea of, so what happens if it's not working? What do you pay attention in order to make a shift? Like, ooh, I need to try something new. This isn't my lesson plan, but I need to do something different. What am I honing into? Okay. Okay. Okay, so get them talking, ask questions, guiding. Okay, all of those things that you guys do really well in a classroom, apply it to an individual conversation as well. Sometimes in what we call a typical conversational pattern, we don't think about those things because we're so focused on either a task at hand, like we have to plan this lesson, or we have to map out this unit, or kind of storytelling of like, well, let me tell you how this worked out for me, or let me tell you this time when. Those are kind of typical conversation patterns. Okay, they're not necessarily bad, but they're not particularly effective if this is your goal. If you're really trying to get towards growth and paying attention to when I need to shift or change kind of what I'm doing. So there's some things that you want to, oh my gosh, pay attention to. I'll get this, I promise, as you're in this conversation. So the first thing is about your intention. Okay, so this is that idea that in any given moment in the conversation with your mentee, you're thinking about, is my intention to tell them some information, or is my intention to try to coach them through thinking about something? And it doesn't matter, you can make a decision in a moment about which one of those is important, but you don't want to pretend to coach, but really be telling. Okay, so you're thinking about what's my intention in this conversation. The second thing is this idea of you having your full intention on the other person. And this can be difficult depending on your own background and your own experiences. But this means putting aside your own stuff in your head, which is hard when we're full-time teachers too. And we've also got our own class and we're all thinking about it. Or maybe you guys are co-teachers that you teach the same grade level or the same department or same class, where you're thinking about all this other thing. But really in the moment, if you're really trying to hone in on them, which when you're in that kind of mentor role is thinking about, am I giving them my full attention? And we'll talk about kind of how to do that. And then finally, which is kind of related to that the protege or the mentee is kind of driving the conversation based on their responses. So again, how do you figure that out? Well, if you're paying full attention, then you're going to be able to really think about what they're saying and where to go next as a result. Okay, really things we do with kids all the time, we don't necessarily do with adults, especially in a one-on-one kind of conversation. So how this might look is this continuum, which I think is page 3 in your handout, and I made it bigger because there's a lot of information on it. So it's really thinking about stances. In Mentoring Matters, Wellman calls these stances that you can take in a conversation. If you've been through cognitive coaching, they call them support functions. But it's really how you can be in a conversation in any given moment. And you're making a choice, again, based on the intention in that moment. Am I going to consult? And we use consult as instructive. This is where the mentor is giving information. You're guiding the interaction. You're giving information from you to the other person, and you're offering suggestions or solutions. And there are times when you need to do that. But your intention is, I'm here to tell. Okay? That might sound like I'm going to give you an idea for an assessment strategy that you could use in your classroom. I could give you some samples of how other people are using discipline in their classrooms or from other buildings. Or I might point out this is a place where you might want to differentiate. Okay? So it's very directed by the mentor. The next one is collaborative, and that kind of speaks for itself. This is where both parties, you and your mentee, are equally contributing in the conversation at that particular moment. So the idea here is that you might have a lesson coming up and you plan it together. But again, that's not you bringing a lesson plan and saying, here, do this, which happens sometimes, and that's okay. But this is one where you're equally contributing. I've got some ideas, they've got some ideas, and you kind of together put equal amounts in and come up with something at the end. Okay, that can be co-planning, it can be problem solving, where again, you both are putting ideas in. It could be looking at student work, where you're trying to figure out, how do we analyze this using a rubric. It could be going and observing another teacher together and then talking about it afterwards. But you're both equally contributing. And then the third one is more that coach role. I'm facilitating their thinking. This one is totally driven by the mentee. You're going to use the skills of paraphrasing and asking questions in order to help them clarify their thinking about something, but you're not putting new information into the conversation. You're really just kind of what you were saying before. You're guiding their thinking by offering them some scaffolds. Okay, so that's more like they're looking over data maybe they got from their principal on an observation, and you're just asking them some questions about how it went, and they're thinking out loud about how it went. Or they want to implement something new in their classroom, and again, you're not telling them what to do, you're just kind of paraphrasing and asking questions to help them think about it before they try it out. Okay, so your choice as the mentor in any given conversation is to choose between this. So they call this a continuum, and you're going to flow between it. I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong. Do this, don't do this. You hopefully will tap into all three of these. But you're thinking in the moment about what does this person need now. So if you have one of those teachers that are, especially in their very first year, you may end up more on the consultative side, right? Because there's some things they just don't have in their toolbox and they need some ideas. If you have a teacher who's been teaching longer, you might be able to hang out more on the coaching side because they've got some things to kind of think through. Now, don't be lured into this idea of just because they say, hey, do you have an idea, that you automatically have to then give them an idea. That people tend towards that. It seems easier for me to ask you for stuff, especially when I'm new to a district, but resist going there immediately, unless it's something that you know they just like, they're getting ready to teach in the next 5 minutes and they just need something to go. That's a different story. But if you really are trying to build efficacious people, we want to try to let them tap into what they have inside first. And then if they need it, then you can put a couple of ideas into the hopper. Okay? What questions do you have about this? Does this make sense? All right, let's kind of play with it. So I'm going to put up some statements, some strategies on the screen that you might do with your mentee. And at your table, or you can work in a partner, or you can work as a whole table. That's up to you guys. Decide where would that go on the continuum. So using page 3 is probably what I'd have in front of you, and you can jot them down if you want, or there's a back page that's blank. If you want to write them down, you don't have to. It's just ideas. It's just to kind of think about, would this be a moment that is, I'm coaching? Would this be a moment that I'm collaborating, or would this be a moment where I'm consulting? All right, let's try it. So I'm going to just put them all up here to start, and you can work through them however you want, and then we'll go through them one by one, and you guys can tell me what you think. So here are the strategies. Here are things you might do, both screens over there, with your mentee. Where would they go on that continuum? Chat with your neighbor or your table. Okay, if you'll finish that sentence. All right, let's see what you talked about. How about modeling a class meeting? Which one would that be? You are the model of the class meeting. Consult, right? So again, it's coming from you to the other person. Yes, we all agree? Okay, co-teaching a lesson. Collaborate. Anything with that co in there is kind of a giveaway, isn't it? Okay, how about videotape a lesson for reflection? What did you say about that one? You said coach. Why do you say that? Okay, so if I videotape for them and then they watch it and then I kind of ask them some questions and paraphrase them about the reflection of it, again, where they're directing kind of the conversation, then that'd be coaching. If you videotape it and then you give them a list of all the things they did well and they didn't do well, or a rubric of some sort, but you're the person who's filling that out, then that's consulting. So it just depends on kind of what you do with it afterwards. Does that make sense? Again, that's one of those intention things. If it's prior to their first observation, and they say, I want your feedback before my principal or my evaluator comes in, that might be an opportunity to give them the information. So that would, you maybe have a rubric that you use and you fill that out for them. If you videotape it and you purely have a conversation about it where you're just kind of probing their thinking, then that's coaching. So again, just making that decision. How about collect and analyze together observation data? Yeah, that together in there, right? So you're doing it together, you're both contributing. Role play a problematic student-teacher interaction. Yeah, if you're truly role-playing where, maybe you're being the student and they're being the teacher and you're both contributing to that conversation, then yeah, that would be collaborative for sure. Share an effective strategy for engaging diverse students. Consult. Assist with rearranging the room. Okay, so this one actually could be any of the above, right? If you come in and say, here's what I recommend you organize the room, then you are consulting. If you say to them, hey, tell me what you want me to do, they're directing it, then you're coaching. And if you're both contributing to the thinking around how the room's organized, then it's collaborating. So that's a good example of you could choose depending on kind of where you're going and where they are. Provide a lesson plan. Okay. Attend together and debrief a workshop. Okay. Order resources. Yeah, absolutely. If you say, here's the order form, here's what we need, fill it out for them, you're definitely on the consulting side. If you're doing it together, it might be collaborative. Listen to the new teacher's reflections on something that they're going to put in their professional portfolio. Coaching, right? Because you're listening to their thinking. Okay, does that make sense? So again, not one right, wrong. You're going to make a decision at any given moment in a conversation, just the way you do in your classroom. You're making decisions at any given moment about where I'm going to go next, and are they getting it? This is the same in a one-to-one conversation as well. Okay, so what is it, why, and then the how. We've started to talk a little bit about the how of the learning focus interaction, but these other three pieces are also part of that how. So the next one we're going to talk about is maximizing your listening. I'll just start with this. So think about a time where you had a conversation with someone that you truly felt listened to. Maybe even a name pops into your head or an interaction pops into your head. How did you know that you had their full attention, and what was going on, either for you or for them? Turn to someone nearby and talk a little bit about that. All right, finish that thought. So what are some of those things that you can really remember, those observable behaviors from that kind of a conversation? What? Eye contact. Okay. So they're not looking at their phone, they're not typing on a computer. They don't have a fidget spinner. Asking questions, right? You were asked some questions. What else? Okay. You both were participating in the conversation. How did you feel after the conversation was over, at the end of the conversation? Did you want to go back and talk to them again some more at some point? Yeah. True listening is rare, and we're in this busy pace that we keep in our society. When you truly listen to someone, it builds relationships, it supports learning, and it maximizes all that professionalism that we want in education. So there are some things that you can kind of pay attention to in order to maximize that. So some of those signs you've already mentioned a minute ago. Alignment or rapport is the first one. This comes from nonverbal. Somebody said that earlier today. That idea that 65% of our message is communicated nonverbally. So we can say lots of things, but if our nonverbals are not matching what we're saying, that message is going to be received more loudly than what you're actually saying. So the nonverbal of alignment or rapport is physically connecting with someone. You guys probably do this with kids all the time. When there's a problem and you walk over and you say, listen, I noticed that you're having a hard time focusing. Right? I get in rapport because if I do it like this, I notice that you're having a hard time focusing. It communicates something totally different to the child, right? So the same thing's true in a conversation. And this is hard because, again, if you're like me, you may be having these conversations, at who knows when. And if you have a desk between you or a computer between you, it communicates something differently than if we're having a conversation. Those of you that teach primary grade, you might know the knee-to-knee concept, right? That idea of knee-to-knee, eye-to-eye, right? This non-verbally communicates, I'm really trying to be with you in this moment. So it can be something that actually happens naturally. You don't even think about it. If you start to pay attention to adults, both on TV as well as in your schools, we have a tendency to get into alignment without even realizing it. It could be, there's an interesting male-female difference too, that men tend to get into alignment side by side a little bit more. They're more comfortable with that. Women tend to be a little more forward-facing. Doesn't make any difference. They both are alignment. That's the idea that I'm non-verbally communicating, I'm with you in this moment. Okay, so it happens naturally. We have a tendency to do it. If you start looking for it, you'll notice it. But you can also intentionally choose it when there's some tension. So again, thinking of that student, something's going on that isn't really good, so I'm going to get into rapport with you in order to communicate that I'm with you, even though I don't like what you're doing, but I'm trying to understand what's going on for you. It can also be if you're trying to communicate, like, I really am not getting what you're saying, so I can maybe lean in a little bit more, or it seems silly, but like cross my legs if you're crossing your legs, or put my arms like you're putting your arms. It's like, again, it's sending a nonverbal purposefully. You probably aren't going to think about it most of the time, but if you're in a conversation and it's just not exactly gelling, you can do that as a way to send a nonverbal signal to the other person. Okay, the next one is, I just mentioned physical. Vocal, so those are physical things that you can do to get in rapport. Vocal is your tone, that your tone matches the other person. If they come at you and they're like, oh my God, you're not gonna believe what just happened. We had this great little lesson and you respond with, that's very interesting. It's a total mismatch, right? Like they're super jacked up about it. It could be good or it could be not good. But you want to be like, oh my gosh, what happened? So it's just a tone match that, again, is communicating, oh my gosh, I understand what you're doing, where you are in this exact moment. Okay? It can also be the kind of language that you use. If you notice they use a lot of visual language, you might want to use visual language back. So saying things like, what do you envision for your upcoming lesson? Okay, it's just a visual thing. If this is something you could pay attention to or not. Again, it's all ways that you can communicate that connection in a way that's different from just your typical conversation. Breathing is one you're probably not going to think a whole lot about, but it is something that can get people in sync. Again, you may have noticed this with students who are upset. We ask them to take deep breaths, and you're probably breathing along with them, whether you even realize it or not. But that, especially when there's tension or stress, just kind of, let's take a minute and, okay, you ready to have this conversation? Or are you ready to talk about whatever? Okay. All right, now there's a couple of things that can get in your way, and you probably can recognize all of them. The first one is this idea, we call these blocks to understanding. So these are all on your part, things that could be going on in your head that prevent you from truly listening to someone else. The first one that we call I listening, I like to call this kindergarten listening. So this is the concept of the kindergarten teacher who says, today we're going to read a story about cats, and everybody's hand goes up. But what they say is, I have a cat, my grandma has a cat, we had 2 cats, there was a dead cat in my yard today, right? There's all these cat connections. They want to tell their stories, which has nothing to do with the purpose of your lesson that particular day. So I listening in a conversation is when somebody else is talking and you're thinking about all the things in your life that connect to what they're saying. Stories of things you did, stories of students you've had that were just like their student. We tell those stories to express connection. But what happens is, as soon as I start talking about my story, I'm not focused on your story anymore. And in a mentoring relationship, I want to know, why are you telling me that story? What is it about this story that either is causing you joy or stress, or there's a reason why you're telling me the story? And as soon as I put that focus back on myself, I'm not talking about you anymore. So if you can set that aside a little bit, again, unless you're going into that consult role and you're giving them suggestions for a reason, try to resist the storytelling, okay, at least initially. So that's personal referencing. The next one is personal curiosity. Personal curiosity I call soap opera listening. So this is where you're just curious about everything they're saying, and you want to know, ask them all kinds of questions for the juicy details. This is particularly difficult in schools where we teach in the same building or the same department, or we share kids or we share colleagues, because we're interested. It's a lot easier to not worry about those things if you don't know someone that well. But you always need to be asking yourself, I'm asking this question, why? Is it because the question will help you in your thinking, or am I asking the question because I just want to know the answer? And if I just want to know the answer, I might be able to find it out some other time, some other place, but not in the precious little 30-minute meeting you have every other week, or how often you're meeting with your person, okay? So try to keep that also to the side. And then the last one is personal certainty. This is a hard one for teachers. I call this the fix-it listening. So they're talking, and within 30 seconds, you've already solved the problem for them. Okay, if you would just do this, it'll be perfect, right? I've got ideas for how it might work. Again, as teachers, this is hard, and this is maybe something you struggle with kids too. We always want to fix it for them. We can do it faster, we can tell you the right way to do it, but who am I going to need when I have that problem again in the future? You, right? I'm going to have to come find you every time I have a problem. And we want to help people create people who are self-directed, who don't need to rely on someone else in order to solve their problems. So the idea is explore their thinking a little bit first, and then if there's nothing in their toolbox, then consider offering a couple of suggestions. And both, I don't care if you're offering suggestions or if you've got advice or if you've got strategies, my personal recommendation is don't just give one. Because as a mentor-mentee relationship, there's a lot of pressure that if you offer it, I have to do it, and what works for me may not work for you because of your personality and your teaching style and the kids that you have. So offer more, at least 2, so I have some choices, and then see if one of those might work for them. I love to also say I've seen other teachers do, instead of just saying I have done. Now those other teachers might all be me, but they don't need to know that. So could I share some things that I've seen other teachers do, and I give them a couple of ideas and then say, would one of those work for you in this situation? So I'm putting them back in the driver's seat to see what works for them. Does that make sense? Check in with the person nearby just about this information, just kind of, what are you thinking about right now? How does that resonate for you? And finish that thought that you're on. What questions do you have, or what questions are bubbling up for you? What kind of questions are bubbling up, or things that maybe you're not so sure about? Yeah. Yep, that's a really good question, and it's very real as well. I think if you think about, let me back up and say, this is not a typical way that we are in most conversations, right? I mean, again, the pace of our life is not that we can really focus on that other person 100% of the time. So I totally agree with you. However, if you experience it, you know you want more of it. You all said that at the beginning. When you think about that person who really listened to you, you were like, wow, I really like talking to them, and that was beneficial to me. It helped me with my thinking. So it is a toss-up. It is like in this given moment. And maybe if you have, let's say you have 30 minutes together, maybe 10 minutes of it is them just talking and you truly listening, and them, asking some questions and paraphrasing. I'm not saying you just stare at them for 10 minutes. You can ask questions. I'm a big fan of paraphrasing because it helps me show that we're on the same page, not repeating what they're saying, but kind of getting the essence of what they're saying, right? But then you shift into another mode, and I would aim towards collaborate as much as possible, because that really builds their efficacy if they feel like they're contributing too. Now, I know I was out of the classroom for some time and went back to the classroom just a few years ago, and that first year I just said to my teammates, I am going to be a complete and total sponge. I need you to just give me everything, because I'm just overwhelmed, and so but next year I will be 100% contributing member of this team. And they were like, okay, we understand that, but I did take a lot more than I gave that particular year, and I knew that about myself. So even saying to the person, that's okay. This is a lesson, use it. And then let's talk about it afterwards and see how it worked for you. And then next time you teach this lesson, totally tweak it. So absolutely, it is a balance for sure. But if you can even work in a little bit of this where it's really focused on that other person and you're not putting new stuff into the conversation, they will notice the difference. You'll notice this yourself if you just go home to your family and you try this way of listening, if you don't normally do this, because people will say, what did you go to? Did you go to some training? What are you doing to me? Because we don't really listen to each other that much. I mean, we're doing 10 things at once, and it's hard. So seriously, if you sit down to your child and go knee to knee and say, so tell me a little bit about what's going on at school today. They're going to be like, what is wrong with you, lady, right? So because we don't. We're driving the car, and you're eating something, and you're getting, like my daughter's getting on her dance outfit in the back. All of those things are happening at once, right? So just kind of, again, we're laying those foundations for, this is how professionals, this is what will sustain you as a professional. If you are crazy all the time, you are going to burn out. But if we can just take 10 minutes of our 30 minutes together where we're just going to be calm, and I'm going to listen to you, and from that 10 minutes, it'll set what we need to do for the rest of the 20 minutes or 40 minutes or however much more time we have. And then you can shift gears into maybe more consult or collaborate. Just play with it is what I'm suggesting, and see how it feels, because it's a gift, really a gift, if someone can truly listen to you. Thank you for that. Okay, a couple of other kind of things to remember. This is, effective listening is you truly want to hear what they are saying. And it's not just, I'm doing this thing because Connie said I had to be their mentor, right? It's, I truly want to know and understand what you have to say. That you have a totally separate view of the world. And that can be really difficult if you are colleagues, which, by the way, if you are teaching the same grade level or in the same department or class, when you're in the mentor role, that's different than when, say, you've got maybe 3, 4, 5, 10 other people that are in that team, like that, you have a different role in that place, and you may be more equally contributing there because you're part of a team. But when you're in that mentor stance, when you're in that mentor role, it's a different purpose, right? You're there to really help them think through. So just that whole idea of that the other person has a separate way of kind of seeing the world, and they may be totally different from you, and being okay with that. That can be difficult because you may be thinking in your head, oh my God, if you do it this way, it's gonna blow up in your face, but it might not. So just try to listen, help them think through maybe the pieces that you have some concerns about, but be okay with them trying something, as long as it's safe and legal, you know, something that might be really different from the way that you would do it, and then talk about it afterwards and see what happened, because that experience they're going to learn a lot more from than you saying, oh, that will never work, do this. That's not going to make them super strong and efficacious. And that you trust that other person's capacity to handle the work, okay? But realizing that sometimes you need to say, okay, we are going to leave here as soon as school is over, and we're going to go and we're going to work for 30 minutes on whatever it is you need to do, and we're just going to lock the door and not letting you, like, you can definitely take control of situations when you know they just need to focus or to get something done. That's okay too. Just don't do that 100% of the time. Okay, questions about that? All right, listening, it's a great thing. Okay, so I'm going to offer you a couple of protocols for conversations. You can have whatever kind of conversation you want, but I'm going to share a couple of things that have really benefited me as a mentor working with teachers. I, for a while, was the mentor to all of our secondary teachers. So I think you have a Debbie and a Peggy. Yeah, so I did that in Clayton for a while. And so I mentored a lot of people, and these protocols were really helpful to me. Okay, protocols offer scaffolding and they offer safety, and if you have this like third point of this thing that you're following, it takes the pressure off. Like, you're not doing it because I'm telling you to do it. We have this protocol that I'm trying out, and it kind of puts it out here. It's this third point in the conversation. So this first one I'm going to share with you is from the New Teacher Center out of Santa Cruz. They did a ton of work because in California they have a lot of teachers who come from other careers, and they like fast track certify them and get them in classrooms, and they have zero educational background in their schooling. And so they started this program of full release mentoring for these people because they needed like serious help really fast. But what they put together is kind of like the down and dirty for working with new teachers. So this is really focused on those brand new teachers, but I use it with all experience. So this is like a 4-part protocol. The first part is just kind of checking in. That first part starts with, so how's it going? And that's how it starts. It's nothing big and fancy. But in that question, you're making connections, you're building trust, there's that listening part, you're identifying what's going well and what are challenges. And you're just asking them a couple of questions and hearing what things are going, how things are going. From that, then you're going to identify maybe or help them prioritize which of those challenges should we spend the time talking about today. And that moves us into the second one. So we're going to establish a focus for the work today in our conversation. And you do that through paraphrasing and asking those clarifying questions. Okay, so sounds like you've got 3 things going on that are on your mind. Which one do you want to talk about first so that we can really focus our time together? The third part is that idea of supporting growth, right? That creating challenge that we talked about a little bit ago. So this could have some direct teaching. That's the consult mode. You might go to, can I share 3 ideas for you? Or here's a lesson plan you might want to use as a starting point, where you're just giving them some information. It could be a collaboration moment where you collaboratively create something together. Or it could be you stay in coaching mode and ask them questions to kind of think about either a plan or reflect on something that already has happened. And then the last part is just the kind of wrapping it up. So, okay, between now and the next time we meet, which is when, putting a date on the calendar if you don't already have that, what am I going to do and what are you going to do? Kind of assigning roles. I'm going to make sure I get you. I'm going to send you that article. You're going to collect some student work on that assessment, and you're going to bring it. We're going to it's just going through who's going to do what. Okay, so it's kind of easy, but it's really effective. So we're going to watch a video that I'd like you to kind of watch for these 4 things. So you have this page in your packet on page 6. We're going to watch a conversation. It's just a little 6-minute conversation, so it's not very long. And I want you to notice what kinds of questions was the mentor asking in each of these arenas. So how did she assess the teacher's needs? What did she ask or do? How did she help establish a focus for the work? How did she support the teacher's movement forward? And how did she practice accountability? Okay, questions about that? All right, so the video, the coach, or the mentor, excuse me, is the one in the pink jacket here, and then this is the new teacher. Okay, hold on while we do tech. Always thank goodness there's a Connie, right?
Implementation plan and what you're thinking of.
Well, I have one, you know, that we're rolling out Google Apps to our whole district this fall, and people are at different stages of knowledge about the initiative even happening. Some people already have accounts because they're in the pilot group, and then other people don't even know that it's coming or what the world it is. So what I'm concerned about is for those people who haven't heard about it yet, and that at the first mention of it will inevitably be super nervous. So I want to plan, like, how can we introduce the concept and this tool as, like, in a funny way or something that's going to help reduce their anxiety, like, in that moment.
And who else is involved in the project?
I have Scott and some other people on the
Okay.
teaching and learning team, and then the IS team can help with the messaging too.
Okay, and so what have you talked about with your team so far?
We've just talked about, like how are we going to let them know they have an account part. So we have an email written up of like, wow, you have a Google account now, and this is your password, and it's going to ask you to change it after the first time. So that's like the very basics of you're going to have an account. But for some people, they're going to get that email and be like, I didn't sign up for an account or whatever. So we do have sessions scheduled with some of the big programs already. So I guess one thing would be to make sure that at some point, like probably before October, we can get our faces in front of every group or subgroup of staff.
So you're thinking about what the barriers are going to be and what the challenges are going to be right from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of those?
Well, not understanding what it is, how it's different from what they're already doing. Or in the case of, especially a lot of the EAs, maybe they don't even do a lot on the computer, so why would they need to pay attention? And they might not need to pay attention. They might not use it because it's all going to be an optional thing, but I just don't want anyone to be like, they're making us do something that we don't want to do.
So one of the challenges is identifying who's actually even going to need to spend time with you on this?
Yeah, that could be. Or how much they need to hear right off the bat.
Okay. And so some of the ways that you've thought about dealing with rolling this out, just tell me what some of your plans are.
Well, we do have like 1 and 2 hour like rah-rah sessions scheduled with some, but that's mostly licensed staff. So it's actually, this whole talking this out is making me think about the EA training day, and that Scott and I could probably use that time to do something tailored. I guess it kind of is more the EAs that I'm worried about, of how are they going to get a positive message about this. The licensed staff, we're kind of good, like we know the foundational stuff we're going to teach and examples we're going to give and stuff, but how we can twist it for the EAs to make them feel good.
So for people that you're not quite sure how much they're going to use it, or how much knowledge they have, some of
Yes.
the ways to deal with making them feel more comfortable,
Yeah.
what are you thinking might work?
Well, I think there's some great, like, kind of funny little videos to show what Google could do, and then just making them at ease, like it's not something you have to do, but there are those handful of EAs that are actually, they are leaders in technology for the teachers too, so I don't want to like disempower them.
Right.
So there's, I want it to be like, wow, I could do this, and like we're available to help you.
So are there constraints that keep you from bringing people together that are at the same place? Or do you have to do it program by program, or can you do it based on kind of differentiating by knowledge, experience, and desire?
Oh no, we could do that potentially, we kind of have some of those people in our mind, and we can go talk to them on an individual basis. Like, hey, you wanted to do this project last year, now we have Google, now you can do it.
Okay.
Like, you have the tool now, and let's work on it. And we've been approached individually by some of the EAs too, to learn better and get up to speed. So yeah, I guess we wouldn't have to have it be a blanket thing.
Okay, so it sounds like you've anticipated a lot of the problems that you're gonna have and challenges, and so what's your biggest worries around planning this implementation?
Oh, I think that someone will get the wrong idea of what it is and kind of start to plant the anxiety seed around to other people who haven't had a chance to hear our message firsthand from us.
Okay.
So that's why I'd like to get it out there sooner rather than later, so there isn't time for any small or large group of people to feel like they've been left out or forgotten or
Okay,
expect to do something they're not getting trained in.
so ways to do that you're thinking about?
I think the big one now that I've talked with you is remembering that we have that whole day of where we will have contact with all the EAs in the district if it's like last year. So we can for sure get out a small message there. We know the sites where there's going to be a higher expectation from the manager that the licensed staff use it, so we can help focus on the other staff at those programs. That would be maybe a higher priority.
Okay,
And we can do some bulletin items, and we can talk with Jean too about doing like a booth at the welcome back or some of those kind of feel good things. I have a few ideas.
yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
you've got a lot of good ideas. And,
This helps me to clarify which ones to focus on, I think, yeah.
all right, well,
You know
great.
me, I'm always full of ideas.
Well, great, I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Okay, just check in with your table, thinking about those 4 quadrants. What did you hear in each of those sections? Okay, if you'll finish that thought. Okay, first a little soft self-assessment. As you were listening to the conversation, if you were wondering, what's an EA and what is she, what state was this in? Is she from Wisconsin or Michigan? You might be struggling with that curiosity listening. If you were thinking, oh man, I remember that time when we started using Google, that made me so crazy. You were thinking about your own situation using a technology, you might be struggling with that personal referencing, right? That kindergarten listening. And if you were thinking about all the ways she should organize her training in your head, then you might be struggling with that fix-it mentality, okay? So just do a little personal self-assessment and think about that, okay? That's what I'm talking about. That stuff doesn't matter if you're truly in that listening mode, okay? That was only a 6-minute conversation. Now let me ask you this before I go through the protocol. Do you think it helped her? Yeah, I mean, she said a couple of times, oh, as I'm saying this out loud, or this really helped me clarify my thinking. It was 6 minutes, okay? It doesn't take a ton of time to just focus in that kind of coach role, okay, in terms of those stances. Now, she could have then shifted into, do you want to go ahead and plan out that first training? And she might have said yes, and then you might shift, okay? All right, what did she do to assess the teacher's needs? What were some of the things she asked the mentee? What did the mentor do? Okay, so she was helping her think about the other people on her team. What else? Okay. What's already done or what's in your mind already? Okay, that's probably moving into establishing a focus for the work. What are you scared about? What are you nervous about? What are you struggling with? What are some barriers, I think is the word she used, right? That's moving into that establishing a focus for the work, because it's helping you focus on what does she want to spend the rest of our conversation about. Anything else for establishing a focus for the work? Okay, how about supporting the teacher's movement forward? What did she do that might help her think about some things that she wouldn't have necessarily thought about on her own? Okay, so she put out that word differentiate. Sometimes the concept label, giving someone, because you might not think about that with doing Google training, but oh, differentiate. Yeah, I do that in the classroom, so I probably want to do that with my adult learners too. So labeling it that way. Okay. Great. So the questions she asked weren't necessarily new, but it built her confidence in that, yes, I have thought about that. I'm feeling good about where I'm headed. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Yep, that idea of if you can predict it, you can prevent it concept. Okay, then how about on that accountability? What did she do to kind of wrap it up? Yeah, there wasn't as much that was nitty-gritty. She did say you have a lot of ideas. So she was kind of summarizing it. It was a paraphrase. So you have a lot of great ideas to choose from. And again, you might hold on to them and be able to name them back to them, but not necessarily. She knows what the good ideas are. Just kind of saying you've got a lot of ideas and you kind of know where you go next. She probably could have finessed that a little bit more at the end, but this is a model. This is not a perfect conversation by any means. It's just a conversation for us to look at and kind of think a little bit about. Okay? So if you think about that time piece, I mean, you could do that in 6 minutes as a starting point and then decide where to go from there based on what they raised as issues and concerns. Okay. All right, there's a couple of other templates in your handout that are a little bit more related to if you've had any cognitive coaching training, but this idea of these are all things you might want to do with your mentee. So it could be we're setting a goal. It could be like my professional goal or a goal for a unit. It could be I'm planning a lesson or a unit or a meeting with a parent or conferences or something like that. Problem solving, we always have problems. All of us have problems, so having to think through problems. And then reflecting after something's, so like I taught a lesson and I want to reflect on it, or I taught a unit and now I want to reflect on it. So if you take a look at pages 8 through 10, there are descriptions of each of those, kind of when you might use them, and then 11 and 12 have the templates. And the template is used loosely. Really what you're looking at are the questions that are being posed under each of those. So take a few minutes and read through that, and you can certainly have some table conversation. Compare that to the other one. To that first protocol, yeah. That one's real simple. These are a little more complex. So you're looking at pages 8 through 12.